Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual dedication event for the official naming of the Ken Matheny Center for the Study of Stress, Trauma, and Resilience. I'm Jeff Ashby. I'm a professor in the Department of Counseling and Psychological Services, and along with my colleague Ken Rice, I co-direct the center. Just so very pleased that you've joined us this afternoon for this special occasion. Now, one of my privileges as a professor in the Counseling Psychology PhD program, the Department of Counseling and Psychological Services, is to interview scarily bright and talented applicants for that PhD program. And in a recent interview with one of those applicants who was attracted to the program in large part because of the center's work, the applicant asked, "When did the center start?" And so I started to give my standard response that it was roughly 2016 or so, but I paused. I paused and I thought about the official purpose of the center, which it says on our website is bringing together scholars and professionals from multiple disciplines to conduct research and develop interventions for stress and trauma prevention and to promote resilience. So I paused and I recalled coming to Georgia State 25 years ago or so and moving into a small office immediately adjacent to Ken Matheny. Now, I was familiar with Ken's research in stress and coping and the research that he developed with Bill Curlett and Chris McCarthy, the Coping Resources Inventory for Stress, the measure that they developed. But as a Midwesterner, I was naturally a little reticent to push myself into working groups or social circles, but Ken quickly drew me into conversations looking for overlaps in our work, and thus began a mentoring process that has continued for many years. So through Ken, I was introduced to a community of scholars within the department, college, university, and literally around the world. At one point, I determined that Ken was collaborating on stress research with colleagues across the university, in numerous states, and on 3 continents. In addition to his extensive scholarship, Ken also taught graduate courses on stress management and strategies for change that were officially electives in the department, but were largely seen as mandatory if you wanted to understand and practice interventions to be helpful to clients around stress, trauma, or resilience. I had the chance to sit in on those courses and occasionally help out, and as a result, I got to watch how Ken translated the most complex research findings into practical applications for mental health professionals to assist clients and build resilience. And students would gather early and stay late to talk with Ken about the application of interventions, how they might be tailored to best meet client needs. Now, those of us who had the privilege to sit with Ken in his office and talk about research will recall that he could seamlessly shift from a discussion of complex and elegant research design to cutting-edge statistical analyses, a comprehensive integration of the current literature, references to current world issues, metaphysics, analytical philosophy, and occasionally the humor of Mel Brooks. If you had the privilege of having one or more of those conversations with Ken, you will also recall that he had the uncanny ability to, unlike other obviously gifted intellectual scholars, Ken could make you feel smarter for having been in the conversation. You may recall that feeling of, on the one hand, feeling a little elevated and smarter for having been in the conversation, and on the other hand, like you should probably take 2 to 3 years off from other things and just read. I sat in that interview with the PhD applicant and I thought about that question. When did the Stress Center start? And I realized that it started long before 2016 and long before I arrived at Georgia State. Throughout his career, Ken had been, as the purpose of the center states, bringing together scholars and professionals from multiple disciplines to conduct research, develop interventions for stress, trauma prevention, and to promote resilience. Now, in 2016, Ken Rice and I simply added some additional structure to a center that Ken had been leading for decades. It's most appropriate that the center bear the name of its founder, the Ken Matheny Center for the Study of Stress, Trauma, and Resilience. And so, when did the center start? That applicant asked me. I said, well, a long time ago, but this year, we get to give it its proper name. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Ken Rice, the Ken and Mary Matheny Endowed Chair and the co-director of the center.
Thanks, Jeff. Sorry, we have an echo. Try that. So as Jeff mentioned, I have the double-sided honor of holding a position that's named after and endowed by Ken Matheny. So on the plus side, it is indeed an honor to have this position, and it has become especially gratifying over time. The more that I've learned about Ken, his professional contributions to the department and the college, and about him as a person. I've been humbled when some in our department have made very nice comparisons about us. And there have been some other pleasant revelations about our similarities. So we both have family connections in West Virginia, of all places, have spent meaningful time in Germany, married women who had careers as nurses. We lived in Okemos, Michigan, and worked at Michigan State University, and we drive the same model of car. And before you start thinking of us as long-lost twins, there are some major differences. For example, Ken actually learned the German language, and he took classes conducted in German while in Germany. I was born in Germany and forgot the language. Ken created the Department of Counseling and Psychological Services. Created a department. Making a couple of bookcases is my most tangible creation. As you may already know, or you can probably figure out, I'm relatively good in a small, narrow category of things. Woodworking is not among them. Ken would describe himself almost apologetically as a generalist. But if you watch and listen to him, you realize that this generalist is a Renaissance person. He's somebody that can smoothly put together, kind of as Jeff was saying, an understanding of some topics in a way that to me seamlessly draws on sciences and philosophy, politics, cultural awareness, religious studies, and historical analysis, all packed into one. And like Jeff said, you hang out with him and you feel smarter. And for me, I hang out with him, I feel smarter, and then I leave and I realize how much there is for me to learn. It probably comes as a little surprise that compared with my version, Ken has a newer and better version of the car. On the other side of the honor of the name position are my concerns that I'm living up to the name and behaving in ways that reflect positively on Ken. Now that's all self-imposed pressure. It's none of it coming from Ken or anyone else. And although I'm kind of phrasing this as the other side of the coin, it's a positive kind of stress. It's one that encourages me to every so often ask things like, how might Ken respond? And what might Ken say or do in this situation? Of course, I can't get out of the way of myself, so mistakes and blunders have been inevitable. But there again, I can rely on those mantras and I can look to a life of professional and personal accomplishments that have been sustained despite challenges and setbacks. It's my sincere hope that naming the center after Ken has the same effects on others that the named position has had on me, that it reminds us of the person and his best qualities, that it encourages us to connect with others in different fields, to look for insights and integrations outside of our usual familiar zones, and to work on meaningful interdisciplinary projects and relationships. I hope that the name prompts us to be thoughtful and kind, and at the same time to deal directly with difficult issues, to be respectful and rigorous, to regroup, forgive, be grateful, and then get back on track after our lapses or mistakes. Overall, I hope that the name reminds us to manage stress in ways that reduces its bad effects and boosts its good effects to improve ourselves and the lives of others. We'll do our best to help the center live up to its name. And we'll start by asking some really important people to say some things. I now have the pleasure of introducing Paul Alberto, Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, and someone who has consistently supported the center since its inception. Take it away, Dr. Alberto.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the two of you hosting and managing and shepherding us this afternoon. As the Dean of the college, I especially want to welcome back so many of these 80 or 90 people who are with us this afternoon. We are under no illusion that the draw that brings you back repeatedly over time is indeed Ken Matheny. And to join us in this celebration and tribute to him is a pleasure for every one of us. Ken joined our faculty here at Georgia State in 1966. And as you've heard, he's the one who created this department. And so many of the people you will be hearing today, as the two just before me, are folks who were mentored personally and professionally by Ken. And therefore, it is not surprising to you, I hope, that the department that Ken created and that these folks carry on is repeatedly ranked in the top 10 counseling and psych services department in our country. It is a tribute to him that the quality that he brought to bear at its very inception has maintained all these decades since. I also want to congratulate and thank the 5,000 or more students who were very fortunate to attend Ken's formal and informal classes over the years. I am so proud that we were able to host these various conversations that you have heard about and will continue to hear about. In 1981, the highest professional scholarly title of Regents Professor was awarded to Ken Matheny. And as you can imagine, everybody understood immediately why Ken's name was added to the list of those distinguished scholars. Ken's scholarship is also noted as he is a diplomat in counseling psychology with the American Board of Professional Psychology and has been awarded fellow status with the Academy of Counseling Psychology, the American Association of Applied and Preventative Psychology, and the Georgia Psychology Association. What is also remarkable is his not strictly academic professional life. We know that he authored 5 books and 85 professional articles, but he's also made instruments measuring coping resources that have been translated into Russian and Spanish and Portuguese and Dutch and Mandarin and Japanese. And Ken Rice and I are smiling, thinking, dear God, when did they do all of this? He also holds numerous citations and honors from corporations and agencies across the country for his contributions to their training and has consulted widely in business and industry all over the world. Particularly fond for the heart of a dean, I want to remind us all that Ken and Mary established the Kenneth and Mary Matheny Scholarship Fund to support students in the Department of Counseling and Psych Services. And as you just heard from our endowed professor, Ken and Mary endowed a professorship in counseling and psych services. It is with great appreciation that I want to show you, Claire, can you pull up the picture? Here is the center and the new signage that just went up so that everybody who comes by, there we are, can know firsthand the honor that we are presenting to you. Most important of all, as you will hear repeatedly today, Ken was friend and mentor to us all, and we all have that appreciation that we carry in our hearts. It's now my pleasure in turn to pass the baton to Dr. Brian Dew, the department chair.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad you could join us. And Ken, thanks so much for your contributions to our department, to the lives of many of us on this call. And personally, I want to thank you for your support of me in the role as chair of the department. I'm reminded of some words that were expressed when we had your retirement party, Ken. And what struck me was trying to go back in time to 1966 when you decided, along with Mary and your family, that you were going to move from East Lansing, Michigan, down to Atlanta, Georgia. And so oftentimes we just kind of roll past that. Oh, it was a move. I want us to think about what Atlanta, Georgia was like in 1966 when Piedmont Park had just become desegregated, when there were marches all over Atlanta. And yet Ken needed to be in Atlanta. He wanted to be. He had a vision for establishing programs and eventually a department at Georgia State University. And this vision was not just let's hire faculty and teach, but it was to build a department that was diverse, and it was comprised of various professional identities, counselors and psychologists and school psychologists and counseling psychologists and mental health counseling students and school counseling students eventually. And it was his vision that this collaboration of faculty and students would work together, train together, learn from each other, which was ultimately its strength when it was founded. And one of the greatest, probably the greatest pride that I take as chair of the department is that if anybody came into our department today and sat in well, we wouldn't have an in-person department meeting because of COVID, but over the last 2 years, but if you could get a flavor of the nature of the culture of CPS today, it would mirror the same passion and vision that Ken had for our department when he started it in 1966. The level of collaboration, of working together, of doing research together, students learning from each other from a variety of professional backgrounds and identities. It's one of our greatest strengths when we go out and recruit successful applicants into becoming faculty members in our department, is our level of collaboration and working together. So I take great pride in being associated with a department that Dr. Matheny, Ken, that you started, you grew, and set such a strong foundation for us even today. So it's my pleasure now to be able to introduce to you one of just many students that learned and trained under Dr. Matheny, Dr. Chris McCarthy.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Thank you. I am humbled and honored to speak today on behalf of the many, many alumni and students who had the honor of working with Dr. Matheny. I was a student of Ken's from 1990 to 1995, and I'm at the University of Texas now. Jeff mentioned talking to a doctoral student about the center, and I was that doctoral student. Back in 1989, I remember my wife and I talk about this at least every other month, getting a phone call from Ken when I was applying to doctoral programs. I was standing in my little apartment in Boston, finishing my master's. Of course, it was on a little landline, one of those little plastic phones we all used, sitting on a desk. And just after talking to Ken and the work that he did on stress, I knew at that moment that there was nowhere else I wanted to be. And I think one of the things that Ken's always communicated is how much the construct of stress resonates with all of us because it captures so many of the trials and tribulations and successes that we have in modern living. And I think the role of stress, as we know now, living through the pandemic, everybody knows about it. But I think then it was not as well understood. So Ken's course in stress management was one of the very first things I took at Georgia State in 1990. And looking back, I realized how fortunate and blessed I was to start off a class with someone who's a luminary in the field at a time when the field was really just kind of still developing. I want to say a few words about Ken's impact as a mentor. And what I want to say is that I think Ken was such a wonderful mentor because he clearly loved what he did. He wanted to instill that passion in other people, and it was palpable. You could really tell that. I distinctly remember Ken saying that if he had to live his life over again, he'd want to be a Georgia State professor. And it was just such a powerful statement about how much he brought to the role and how much he communicated that to other students. And I know that I wouldn't be in my current position at Texas if not for Ken's mentorship. Ken was also a wonderful, wonderful teacher. As people have noted, he's eloquent and total command of his subject matter, but also warm with a sense of humor. To me, it was like taking a class from Aristotle, the Dalai Lama, and Mr. Rogers kind of all rolled up into one. And he was also just such a wonderful role model. When he was talking about psychology, he talked about its role in his own life. He encouraged us to practice what we preach. In his stress management class, we had to do a self-improvement project, and mine was to try and get back into running again. And I found that to be such a wonderful coping mechanism in my own life. By the time I finished at Georgia State, I think I had done a half marathon, and then after moving to Austin, I completed 5 or 6 marathons, and all of it was stuff that I started with Ken. I want to kind of wrap up with just the powerful impact of Ken on the field of stress and coping. I think when I was at Georgia State, stress was still pretty much equated with external events and the negative effects of adverse life experiences. And as several people mentioned, Ken's work, particularly on coping resources and his measure, the CRIS, which I wish I could say was named after me, but sadly is not, had such an impact on the field and looking at the other side of the equation, not just the demands people have, but the resources. He did a lot of his work with Dr. Bill Curlett. They both kind of co-invented that measure along with David Aycock and others. And in my work, I really sought to extend that. I found my own Bill Curlett with Dr. Rich Lambert, who studied with Dr. Curlett, and we've developed a preventive coping measure. We've developed measures for stress for teachers. And all of this really stems from the mentoring that Ken provided me at Georgia State. Finally, I'll say that, as has been mentioned, in addition to being a great thinker and researcher, Kellen is a very eloquent writer. So one of our last collaborations was this book on stress for a general audience. And I still receive messages from people, inquiries about it to this day, because I think it reached a very broad audience, and that's one of the gifts that Ken has. So on behalf of the Georgia State students and alumni, I want to express my sincere thanks to Ken for his mentoring, and my belief that this center will carry on desperately needed work for years to come on Ken's behalf. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks to our administrators, Paul and Brian, for their very nice comments, and for what I guess can be considered our keynote address. Thanks to Chris McCarthy for his heartfelt thoughts and long-term perspective. So we'd be remiss if we did not give the person of the hour an opportunity to say some things. So Ken, can we prompt you for a few remarks?
First thing I have to say is, who's this person you've been talking about? I'd like to meet him. I don't recognize that person. Well, anyway, I'm just so grateful. Actually, I just feel like I swim in a warm sea. There's not no icebergs, no barriers. And I've had so much help from so many wonderful people over my entire lifetime. And I for whatever forces there may be out there in the universe, I want to salute them and tell them, you did a good job placing me where I've been. And the crowning blow of my life was coming to Georgia State. I had a career at Michigan State, and I thought it was promising, and I enjoyed it, and had every intention of being there for many years. But Dr. Woodrow Breland was in the College of Education. Well, it was actually just the Department of Education at that time. And he called me and asked me if I would come down and interview for this position as the founder for the Department of Counseling and Psych Services. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that I said to Dr. Breland, well, Dr. Breland, I really appreciate the offer, and it's really nice of you, but I had just told my graduate students 2 weeks ago that the last place on the United States I wanted to go was to the Southeast. And he interrupted me and said, well, Dr. Matheny, please don't judge Atlanta by Georgia. Said, we're an island here. And you know, he is so right. And now the island is spread out to about 14 counties. And you'll notice in the voting patterns, for instance, it's those 14 counties, including Atlanta, of course, that were swaying the votes so that we had 2 Democratic senators elected this last time. Well, I must say that the former president helped in that, as he told all the Republicans, there's no point in voting. It's corrupt election, and your vote doesn't count. And that helped a lot as well, I must say. But I found a home here, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. It's been wonderful working at Georgia State, and I don't regret a single minute that I've spent here. In fact, I've told so many persons that I never have felt like I've ever worked a day. I've always done what I wanted to do and what was very, very, very fulfilling. And I'm serious when in my retirement, when I said I was going to come back, and I think I said I was first going to propose to my wife again and see if she'd have me this time around. And the next thing I was going to do was to apply for a position at Georgia State University. And I still think that is a very good direction to go. I can't think of any place where the atmosphere is any more conducive to companionship, colleagueship, and to one's work as this department and this college in this university. And I remain enormously proud of it. It's grown from the 6,000 that we had here when I first came to 53, well over 53,000 now. And as someone mentioned, it's the 11th largest student body in the country. And there's so many national speakers who've referred to this university as a model. And I think of Obama in one of his presidential speeches, singled out Georgia State as the #1 university in the country in retaining minority students. And he recommended that other universities study what Georgia State had done. And that just leaves me enormously proud. And minorities have found a very friendly place to be here at Georgia State. I remember Dr. Patton, who was a previous president, who at lunch one time told me, said, Ken, who do you think is the ethnic or racial group that has the highest marks here at Georgia State? And I fumbled around for a minute, and I must tell you that I said, well, it's probably Asian students, and they top out everything else. And he said, no. He said that the students that get the highest marks at Georgia State University are Black women. And I just wanted to celebrate. I thought that was wonderful. And to this day, I'm proud of the fact that when you walk across the campus at Georgia State, it's like walking in the United Nations. We've got everybody here. And I love having everybody here. And I think the best decisions are made when you have all kinds of voices coming in at the same time. And that's incidentally one of the blessings of a democracy. And I'm thinking a moment of the terrible pain that's being incurred on all those Ukrainians at this moment and the bravery they're showing. And basically, they don't want somebody like Putin to stand up and give them orders and direct everything regarding their lifestyles and so forth. And well, I'm getting back to the subject here. I think Georgia State does a great job of that. And we built into the faculty of CPS lots of people from different directions and different persuasions. And when the department has made decisions, it's never been made by the chair. And no matter who's the chair, it's always made by the faculty. And the chairs are also wonderful in that regard, extending a peer status and a great respect for the differences that appear within on any given issue. And that's where the best decisions are made, where the pluses and minuses, positives, negatives, are all out. Well, I'm sorry I've taken a lot more time than I meant to. I just wanted you to know that I deeply appreciate what you're doing and feel like you've honored my work by allowing me to be associated with this center, which I had hoped to erect and never was able to do it until these clever people, Jeff Ashby and Ken Rice, came along and managed to maneuver all of the hurdles that were involved in getting the decision done. And now we've got something to really be proud of. And I wish to support them in every way I possibly can. And I want to thank you all for having tuned in. And I want you to know that I'm grateful indeed that you've taken time out of your schedules to listen in. And it's made me feel very warm inside. And I am deeply grateful and will remember this session for a very long time.
Thanks, Ken, for those comments, and again for all of your work and all that you've done for all of us and all others. I want to thank you all for attending this virtual event this afternoon, helping us honor Ken Matheny by acknowledging this official naming of the Ken Matheny Center for the Study of Stress, Trauma, and Resilience. If you'd like to pass along a congratulatory message to Ken, Angela, I think, has or will, perhaps it's Claire, is going to place a link to a form to pass along that note in the chat. It's also available on the Stress Center website. If you just internet search Stress Center Georgia State, you can find us and that form. In just a moment, we're going to end our formal event, but we'd also like to invite you to stay on the webcast if you are interested, to take a second to greet Ken, say hello. If you're interested in doing that, please do. In closing, I'd just like to say on behalf of Ken Rice and myself, in roughly 2016, we were pleased to become the directors of the Center for the Study of Stress, Trauma, and Resilience. But today, we're honored to co-direct the Ken Matheny Center, the Study of Stress, Trauma, and Resilience. Thank you again for attending today and helping us honor Ken's career and lasting legacy.
Okay. I should unmute him, right?
Yeah. Hi, Dad.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to assist Dr. Matheny. If you would like to speak or send a congratulatory message, you can put it in the chat. If you'd like to speak, there is a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen as part of our WebEx. If you hit that button and raise your hand, we will be happy to acknowledge you so that you can unmute and speak to Dr. Matheny. I think that will help him in locating your screen. And again, we will keep our event open until 2 p.m. if you would like to speak. Thank you again.
We need someone to break the ice, please.
I start. This is Reza Abri. I'm Ken's son-in-law. I got to get to know Ken many years ago. He believed in me before, honestly, I believed in myself. He welcomed me to his family more than I ever imagined that. Ken was just not all the good things you all said about. Ken was also a roofer, a carpenter, a landscaper. He did everything. He had a hands-on. The only thing he couldn't do is to cook. And that's all I want to say. Thank you all. Uh-oh, I don't know what I...
Dr. Richard Blue, I see your hand raised if you'd like to speak. Dr. Blue, would you like to speak?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Rick Blue here. It's Kenneth, Rick Blue. Listen, my fondest memory, 1968, I finished undergrad school and I went to talk to you and you said, listen, your grades aren't great, but if you go this summer and make 2 Bs, we'll see you, we'll let you in our program. So fast forward 1975, I got my doctorate, and I'll never forget the kindness of Ken and giving me a chance along with the faculty because they were just starting. I would never get in today. And that has propelled me to a career as a psychologist after 48 years, and I'll never forget that meeting of an opportunity that obviously was very successful, and it's due to you and that wonderful department that we were so close. We played sports together, and that I owe also the CPS of 1968. So thank you.
Dr. Matheny, I think you're on mute. If someone would like to unmute Dr. Matheny, if he'd like to respond.
Yeah, there you go.
I was just saying to Rick that I very much appreciate those warm remarks, and it brings up a lot of memories for me.
Hey, Dr. Paul White, I see your hand raised if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. Hi, Ken. Paul White here from Wichita, Kansas, class of '89. I remember the first class I attended, I think it was on a Monday night, actually, and your warm welcome and encouraging words to all of us who were new students, and you just went on and how bright we were, and I'm looking around and it scared me to death because I knew I wasn't that bright, and so it must have been everybody else. And but just your encouragement and support that we could do and pursue anything that we wanted to, and that often was a a voice in the back of my head when I would hit difficult times. So thank you for your encouragement, your instruction. You know, the thoroughness of the training that we received was amazing because it's allowed me to not only do work with intelligence testing and testing with students that have learning difficulties, and then moved into other areas where I've been able to continue to do research. I think you and Dr. Curlett would not really call it much research. It's pretty baby stuff, but in the area of human resources, it's more than what's being done. And so just the tools that you gave us really made it easy for us to move out into the world and apply the knowledge and tools to help people. So thanks so much. I remember when I left there to come to Wichita for my internship, this was 89, and people said, you know, what did you do that you're being condemned to go to Wichita from Atlanta? But it was for the best, and it's worked out well. But thanks so much for your input into my life.
Well, thank you, Paul.
So we have Lisa Springer, who has her hand raised. Would you like to speak?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, so Dr. Matheny, oh my gosh, I was in the last cohort of the EDS program. I don't know if you remember, but I'm an African American woman, and Dr. Matheny was teaching stress management, and I was in his class, and I was the mom of a disabled child, and I had two other children, a military spouse, moving from state to state. And I remember we were doing the triad supervisions. And Dr. Matheny happened to step into my triad one night, and I just broke down crying, talking about stress management. And I was the observer of my two fellow classmates. And he stopped the session, and I told him my story, the mother, a Black woman of three children whose husband was deployed, and my son was seriously disabled and blind. And how could I ever make it through the program? And Dr. Matheny, you said, why shouldn't you, Lisa? You said a lot of people wouldn't quit. And I originally started in the rehabilitation counseling program. And at the last minute, I switched over to the last cohort of the EDS program. And that moment changed my life, Dr. Matheny. And if it wasn't for you saying to me, why shouldn't you be here? I wouldn't be where I am today. I also had the privilege of attending your course at your home consciousness, which was a privilege. I remember your wife fixing us lunch. And that was a very class to get into because, of course, it was in your home and only a certain amount of students. I think I was in the last class of that session also. And those two things changed my life. And so there was no way I was going to miss today because I went on to work for the military and to teach other military spouses and mothers of disabled children how to manage stress and become resilient themselves. So I'm tearing up. That's why I don't want to come on camera. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have graduated. I was the class of 2012, and I started the program at 45 years old. And so I just want to thank you for pouring into my life so that I was able to pour into the life of others. Thank you so much, Dr. Matheny.
Well, that's beautiful, and I appreciate your comments so much.
So Janice, I see your hand raised. You're up next.
Yes, I am Dr. Matheny's daughter, Janice, out in Santa Barbara, and I'm gonna let my husband talk because I know I'll just bust out crying. So he will talk.
Well, I want to say for all of you that Lisa was talking about getting the privilege of having a class in the your office at home, Ken, which is a fabulous space. But I want to tell you all, we are so privileged being in the family that we still have these wonderful discussions at your home, not just in your office, but in more intimate surroundings. And Ken is every bit as sharp and on top of all the events and perspectives. And we have the most fulfilling conversations, and we come at it from different perspectives. I'll be honest with you, we are not on the same page, but the two of us can talk. And I think at the end of those discussions, we could solve most of the world's problems between the two of us. But I feel very privileged, Ken, to be your son-in-law and to walk in your shadow, and just love the influence that you've had on everybody's lives. What a remarkable achievement over a very long lifetime of serving and giving. And it's just a tremendous honor to know you and be part of your family. So thank you so much. You do leave me feeling smarter. So I do love those conversations. People bring that up repeatedly today. And it's definitely one of the things I look forward to coming to Atlanta, is just being in your presence. So here's to you and your recognition today.
Well, I love you guys so much. And I'll be seeing you in April, right? Okay, great.
Okay, next we have Peter Thomas with your hand raised.
Peter.
Yes, I was Ken's graduate student around 1970 to 71. And my wife and I found that we were pregnant and wondering how we were going to pay for it. And about that time, Ken had a project in Jackson, Mississippi on helping teachers use positive reinforcement in the school system. And another graduate student, George Warsaw, and I had the privilege of being able to accompany Ken and deal with the schools. And we were supposed to be talking with the teachers. And in one of the classes or the groups, we had a principal who sort of took over and just totally frustrated George and I. And in dealing with him, we lost all perspective of how to use the techniques that Ken had been teaching us that were working quite beautifully with the teachers. And we totally messed it up with the principal. And during the evening, we sat with Ken and he listened to us just carry on about how frustrated we were and what we wanted to do to this fellow. And he just sort of quietly said, "So you're using our principles, right?" We went, no. And he sent us back in there, and we used them with this fellow to such an extent that he actually asked us to come and speak to his whole faculty. And what it did was it took a pretty neophyte green individual who was wanting to be a psychologist to help me settle down and realize that if I had a knowledge, I needed to take control of my emotions enough that I could use it to help others. And it made me stop and think. So every now and then when I'm working with a client, I'll think of you, Ken, and go, am I using the techniques I've been taught? Am I listening to the person? So I thank you for that.
Well, I thank you, Peter. And you brought back additional memories too of all that work. You know, we, Sherm Day and I were appointed court mediators to go into various states and attempt to further the integration of mostly blacks and whites, but in Texas, for instance, it was Hispanics and blacks and whites. And your service, you really, you downplayed yourself. I thought you did a good job, an excellent job. And
Well, it's only because of you.
Well, thank you so much for your compliment.
Well, thank you.
So we have Betsy Ryland with her hand raised. Betsy?
Unmute. Okay. I'm a blast from the past. They graduated from the PhD program in 92. And I have many, many memories. And but one of them that stands out is that we, as a group, we were huddled together studying for comprehensive exams. And Ken was talking with us, and we asked what was his advice. And he said, well, and gave us some good things about running and making.
Betsy, did we lose you?
Mute me. Okay. Am I back? Okay. So cut to the chase. Ken finally said, well, here's a Zen perspective. And he said, when there is to put the cow in the biggest field. Oh, and we thought this was a great help. And that was his advice to us is in such a situation, you want to put the cow in the biggest field. So that has entertained me, perplexed me for many years, but it ended up being very helpful for comprehensives. So I really appreciate that. That your consciousness class, as I said, I still have notes from those classes. And the last thing is, you have come into that stress is the new zeitgeist, and who would have known back? Well, you knew back in the day how important it was, but I'm so glad it has gotten accepted and integrated into the society, into therapy, into the society as an important element of modern life. So thank you so much, Ken.
Well, thank you, Betsy. Once again, each of you talking about the things that happened is just bring back very warm memories. And I appreciate your kind remarks.
Well, you're welcome. You deserve all of it. And talk more. Don't talk less. Talk more. Thank you.
Okay, Aaron Feldman, I see your hand raised if you'd like to speak.
Sure. It's an honor to be here and to wish Dr. Matheny congratulations and just to thank him for everything that he did for me. I'm from the class of 95. And just succinctly, if there are two traits that are been internalized from my experience in the department and with Dr. Matheny, is the desire to be like him. In anytime you're in a conversation with him, you come out uplifted, and his ability to communicate and cherish the dignity in every human being is remarkable. And I aspire to always approach learning the way he does. His approach is, it just seems like in every situation with every human being, his ability to be open to learning and integrate new information is outstanding. And I'm become comfortable knowing I may fall short in both of those, but it's just an honor to be here. So congratulations. It's a treat to see you.
Well, nice to hear those comments. And I'm sure you're offering great service and are underestimating what you're doing.
So I do not see any more raised hands. I did want to circle back to Chris Aubrey. I'm sorry, I missed you earlier. We had a few technical difficulties with locating your hands, but once we did, we were able to get started. But I just wanted to see, Chris, if you wanted to make any remarks.
Just wanted to say, Grandpa, I love you. And I'm so proud of you. And hopefully I want to be like you when I grow up one day. I really thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes.
Okay, I do see a few more hands. Janice?
Sorry. Is that? Yeah. Double dipping here, Grandpa. Here's a question. This is all about you today here, but you talk about stress and coping, and I'm never going to have the opportunity to talk to so many scholars at once here, but I'm sure you focus on stress as a negative. But I remember you saying a long time ago, as we tore into our business, that you seem to thrive on stress. And I agreed that the stress was actually motivating to me and energizing to me. And that's when you were developing Chris, I think, back in the day. But I'm just wondering, all this research, I wonder if there's been any research, or maybe this is a field for somebody to look into, what happens when that stress goes away through retirement and all of a sudden you have no stress in your life. I know cry me a river, but there's definitely some mental negatives to going from a fully stressed and engaged life to going into a completely unengaged life. Not unengaged, but stress-free. So maybe some of you scholars out there can look into that, but I think there's a lot of people struggling with retirement just because you've gone from full throttle to laid back. So anyway, we'll talk about that in April, Ken, but I just thought I have this wide audience out there of clever people, maybe there's a field of research for somebody.
Well, I could comment right now about that from my own experience. And, we define ourselves in our relationships. And one of the relationships I had was as a professor. And when that goes away, there's room for reorganization of who you think you are. But for a while, you feel like you're motherless. You've missed something that was very important in your life. And I think that in retirement, especially someone who lived to work for so much of their lives, one has to redefine oneself. And basically what I've done is to read in allied fields. I do a lot of reading in geopolitics and in geography and cosmology, and at the same time, I'm making a ill-advised effort to learn Spanish. and my brain tells me often that this is a bridge much too far, but I do enjoy it, and I think it's very good to keep the mind alert. And I remember Dr. Ham, who was at the Massachusetts General Hospital, who was saying that in his mind, even though the brain is losing connections and associations all the time, and where everything, the neurons spread out, and so the synapses are wider and it's harder for a message to get through. But he was saying he thought that efforts to learn additional things can create more associations than the brain can get rid of. And I thought that was a great statement on his part. So in a sense, we are renewing ourselves all the time in good or bad ways. And we just need to be better directed in many cases.
Thanks, Ken.
So Jessica Kordansky, your hand raised if you'd like to speak.
Yes, I actually hesitated to talk because I think we can talk for countless hours when it comes to Ken, but I'll try to be parsimonious in my response. But I think back to when I started at Georgia State. I even remember interviewing for the PhD program with Dr. Ashby and Dr. Brack and all the others, and just the impact that everyone had on my life. But I'll speak specifically to Ken at this moment, from teaching psychological change strategies, assisting you with that, to taking the consciousness course and then co-teaching it with you and developing a relationship over time where I think you know this, but maybe the others don't, that you've not only been a mentor to me, but a friend that I would also count as family. And I think so many on this call would probably agree. I forget how the phrase goes, but the last line is, you know, you'll never forget how someone makes you feel. And I think everyone, you know, has been impacted by Ken in such a way. And just the gratitude I feel for having so many conversations with you over time since I left the program in 2010, where we really know so much about each other's families. I even sent you the book by Young Pueblo, which would have really suited the consciousness course. And we've even kind of had a bit of an independent study with that book. But it really feels like yesterday, I think it was Linda Pack and I and Katie, we hosted your 80th birthday. And it's just wild how time flies. In some ways, it feels like a lifetime ago that I was in the program. But then in other ways, seeing Brian and Katie and everyone on this call, it's like yesterday. So I just wouldn't have missed this for anything. It was such an honor to be on this and to just have you in my life for all this time. You've been an earth angel and one of my greatest blessings.
Well, I'm proud of you too. You know, you've gone on to do wonderful things and are right now very busy trying to affect audiences throughout the United States and doing great work with couples. And it makes me happy that you're so successful.
Thank you.
So Dr. William Curlett, if you'd like to speak, you can unmute.
Yeah, I met Ken for the first time in the late 1970s when we both served together on a dissertation committee. And several years after that, Ken was looking for a colleague to help with his research projects. And I know he had a number of possible people to get involved with him. And he talked with me and he ultimately selected me. And so I feel very fortunate that at that point in time in my career, I had a full professor, Ken Matheny, mentoring me and helping me with my research and professional development. And so Ken and I met almost weekly for over 30 years doing research projects. And during that time, I benefited enormously, professionally and personally, from all of our conversations that we had. So I want to thank you, Ken, for all the support you gave me.
Thank you, Bill. Our friendship goes way back.
So Dr. Michael Popkin.
Thanks. Ken, this has been such a joy just listening to so many intelligent, accomplished people that are so grateful to you and to the department you founded, the other professors that you colleagued with. And as somebody that grew up in Atlanta during a time in the 1960s, that time you didn't want to come to Atlanta, and grew up wanting to go to college like the other 250 people in my high school class, but I don't think anybody wanted to go to Georgia State back then. It just didn't have that kind of reputation. And I went off to Indiana and studied recreation. And by the way, I learned something there. If you notice, I'm wearing a ski outfit today because I'm in Vail, Colorado. You're the only person in the world I can think of that would miss a half day skiing to hear a center for stress, trauma, and resilience dedicated to. But it's just a joy every time I see you or hear people that share the same appreciation that I do for you. I don't know why they chose to name the Center for Stress, Trauma, and Resilience, because it just throws a lot of us back into the anxiety of our doctoral comprehensive exams, in which we all share the common bond of stress, maybe not so much trauma, but resilience. But somehow I got through it and became better for it. As I was writing that letter, they suggested we maybe want to write to you that you can read later. I had one memory that I want to share with you. You were my major professor, and when it was time to pitch what I wanted to do for my dissertation, I had come up with this idea of using video and computers together to teach parenting education. Didn't have a name for it, but I thought it'd be a great dissertation topic. And so you listened and nodded your head. And when I was through and was real excited, you said, Mike, I think that's a great idea, but I think it'll take 3 years. And our job is to get you out of here in 1 year. So we picked something a lot more contained. I got my dissertation, and you were right. On both accounts, it was a great idea, and it took me 3 years to get active parenting off the ground. But your support, your encouragement, and not just then, but for the years since then, it's been a blessing to me and my family, and in a lot of ways you'll never know. And a lot of people that all of us that are sitting in this conference right now have touched in our lives, come back from the way you touched us, and again the way the professors that you touched at Georgia State. And it's been also a joy to watch how you and the other people there built Georgia State into a college that people want to go to, not just from Atlanta, but around the world. That's been amazing to be part of. So thank you for everything, and hope we'll have many more years of your wisdom and your friendship.
Well, thank you, Mike. We have so many members together and running and talking and playing ping pong. And I remember being in your home with your mother and father. And at that time, you were thinking of beginning a program for teaching parents better ways of doing that. And you've since fulfilled that with the STEP program. And I'm proud of what you've done. And thank you again for all the warm comments.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Dick Reardon, you're up next. I think you're on mute, Dr. Reardon.
There you go. Okay, start again. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank God for my wife again. But I was talking about Ken being a man of hyperbole. I'll give you the example that made me come this way. Think of this. He told me, he hired me in 1967, the year after he started, to come to the department. And he told me, I forget whether it's when I got there or before, because I'd been in Atlanta maybe once or twice in my life, but it just didn't seem like much to me. And he told me, I guess as a way of kind of convincing me that it was really going to be a boom town, that the limits of the metropolitan Atlanta would reach to the ocean by the time we retired. I thought at the time that was really out of line, I mean, this is really a big lie or something. I mean, that goes beyond hyperbole, But by golly, it's come awfully close. I'll tell you that. But I can, when I came down here talking about some of the things about the university, and I still believe that it has just done nothing but grow too. And it has been so largely in part of Ken since I came down here. I know that, but I can remember I retired in '98. And I just remember the coming from class one evening, walking down to Kid back to my car, and I thought, who on earth would ever want to retire from a job like this, And I have always felt like Ken. I've never been sorry a day or a moment that I took a job there or that I had anything to do with all of the people, students, everybody that have been associated with our times at Georgia State. And I just owe so much of that to Ken to bring me down there, and so much to his leadership, and just being the role model for everybody. Thanks very much. And my wife said, of course, it's friendship. And if he's disappointed about what I said about him being a hyperbolist. He can come down. I live 2 minutes from him. He can come down here and bonk you over the head. I can get my cane out. We can have a duel. If you just don't bring Kurt, because Kurt can be mean. Okay, that's it.
Well, thanks, Nick.
Next, we have Dave Acock. Would like to speak?
Yes. Hello, Ken. And yeah, congratulations on having the center named after you. Obviously, you deserve that. You deserve all of those things, like everyone else. I just appreciate you so much. You've taken me under your wing. You took a guy that didn't know what he was doing in his early 20s and turned him into somebody that could be somewhat respectable in the world. You taught me how to teach. You taught me how to do research. You taught me how to write. But you also took me under your wing, and I feel like you treated me like one of your children. You took me to basketball games, and you took me to your home, and I've enjoyed so many of the professional things we've done together, but I've enjoyed so many of the personal things we've done together. You're just a wonderful person, and thank you so much for being in my life. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate your warm comments.
Mia?
Hey, Dr. Matheny, this is Mia, and so good to see you in the virtual space. I just wanted to say congratulations and thank you. I had the privilege and honor of meeting Dr. Matheny through him and his family's generous scholarship that was given to me, and I had the privilege of just connecting with him so unexpectedly, and just meeting him and connecting him has been such a great blessing for me in my life, and have really enjoyed getting to know him and being mentored by him. And I think sitting in this space, hearing how everyone has been impacted by him just really blew me away in such different dimensions. And I am just so grateful for you, Dr. Matheny, and just the ways that you advocate for me and the GSU family and beyond, and hope to share that forward. So thank you, Dr. Matheny.
Thank you, Mia, and say hi to Jen for me.
I will.
Janice, I see another hand. Janice Connor?
Yes, thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I want to again congratulate Dr. Matheny. I go way back with him to the early 70s. I'm now in South Georgia. I'm a family therapist, and I owe much of my success to him because of his encouragement when I was a high school counselor in the Atlanta public school system. He was such a figure of encouragement to those of us who were wading unknown waters in unknown territory, and he gave us so much confidence. I remember him, and much gratitude goes to him, along with the late Dr. Chet Harris. They were really by our side, and they allowed us opportunities. And I am appreciative to this day, way down in South Georgia, down near the Tallahassee area. And I'm just so appreciative to him and to this honor being bestowed on him. He's most deserving. And congratulations again, Dr. Matheny. I love you.
I love you too, Janice. Thank you for your comments.
Well, thank you, everyone. We are going to conclude with that comment. As a reminder, please feel free to use the form to send your notes to Dr. Matheny. We will be compiling your notes, your letters, your photos into a book to gift to him at a later time. So thank you so much for all of your submissions. We will also share today's recording from this event with all of the attendees. And thank you, and please enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye. Bye, everybody.